Hey everybody, good morning. Happy Friday. Woohoo! How are you? Good to see you. Beautiful day today. Woo! Yes. Getting things done. How has your week been going? I hope it's been going well. Tell me about it. I would love to hear from you. So today I wanted to talk about how do I stay true to myself. And this is a really important principle I've been learning about how we stay true to ourselves. And the funny thing is, it really doesn't have anything to do with other people. Hey, Evelyn, nice to see you. How I stay true to myself, I realized, is not about what other people around me do. It's about who I want to be and how I choose to be and live in the world. So often, I can justify, right, how I respond to something by, well, this person said this to me, or they did this to me, or they did something to me that, um, like, if someone like puts themselves in my space, they say maybe say something attacking, or they say something that I think is really unfair, or that I think is untrue, right? They say, well, you're doing this, um, or they respond to me or to something I do in a way that I think is unjustified, or they are being judgmental or accusatory or putting themselves in my space. So, how do I um, maintain my own boundaries, maintain my own healthy boundaries? And how do I stay true to myself, right? This is the question. So, what I've been working on and learning is in staying true to myself, it's about me deciding who I want to be, not who they are, and not reacting to what they are putting out based on what they're putting out, right? What they're putting out towards me, but based on who I am inside. Who do I want to be? And if I'm acting or thinking or moving from a place of love, then if that's who I want to be, right? If I want to be somebody who doesn't let other people emotionally um, determine or direct who I am or how I feel. Hi, Garcia. Nice to see you. Then I am going to be able to say, I'm going to respond to this based on how I want to respond, based on who I am. Am I choosing to maintain my own integrity? Am I choosing to live in love? Or am I choosing to respond to them in the way they are responding to me, right? In the way that they are speaking to me. Because that is so easy to do. When someone comes at us with something that is critical or judgmental, or we feel is attacking who we are, our automatic response is to respond in kind. Hey, Diego. Nice. Thank you. Thank you for all the emojis. I appreciate it. When someone responds to us in a way that is judgmental, it's very easy to push that back on them. Well, that's your fault, or that's your emotion, or that's not justified. I didn't do that, right? Or um, well, or explain. I did that because of this, this, and that, and the other, right? It's not my fault. Why are you attacking me? It's very easy to come back in that way. And in fact, that's the default, right? But as I have been learning more about love and about maintaining my own healthy boundaries and choosing who I want to be, right? Who do I want to be in the world? Do I want to live from a place of love? Do I want to live from a place of um, moving in love and understanding? And why would I want to do that anyway, right? Why would I want to do that anyway? Because it makes me happier, right? It makes me happier not to have other people's negative emotion and stuff in my space. And that means in my personal space, right? It's possible that it might be in my actual physical space, right? They might be around me, they might be in my vicinity, but am I going to respond to them? Am I going to let that into my emotional space, right? Because we have sort of our own emotional space, our own emotional boundaries. And that is the principle of taking responsibility and really owning yourself, right? So we talk in this framework about I own my body, I own my mind, I own my thoughts, I own my emotions. That means I get to choose what those are going to be and what my response is going to be to somebody who's coming at me with something that I feel is unjustified or unfair, or I just don't like it. Right. So then I get to choose for myself who I am. And you know what I've been discovering? It's been really interesting. But over the last few weeks, I have found that when I respond in kind to what someone else is putting out to me, right? If something is coming at me that is negative and I respond back in a negative way, that only escalates the situation. That makes it worse, right? So my negative reaction and then their negative reaction escalates and my negative reaction escalates, right? And it just gets worse and worse. And when I respond to them with judgment, you're wrong, you are you're exaggerating, or you're not seeing this correctly, or you're accusing me of something I'm not guilty of, right? Whatever that is, when I respond back to them with that, that just escalates it. When I choose to step away from that emotional response and say, who am I? Do I love this person? Do I want, how do I choose to respond? If I choose to engage in the same way that they're engaging at me, then I am allowing that judgment. I'm allowing them into my space. I am taking on what they're giving off, right? I'm taking on that negative energy that then I am giving it back to them, which, what does that do? When we take something on and we push it back and then they push back, it just increases the level of that negative energy. Instead, if I choose to respond and just say, well, I love you, or I hope you're okay, or I hope you feel better, or, I just, instead of taking it on and explaining it away and going with that, right? You shouldn't be so judgmental. What are you being critical of, right? Instead, I respond in love back. Then what does that do? Now, it may take a few times and they may come at me again and I just respond in love again. And then they come at me, okay, and I don't have to necessarily respond to the specific accusation, right? Because if I'm responding to that specific accusation, especially if it's something that is false or unfair, then I am only I'm justifying myself, right? Then that is a way of escalating it as well. But if instead I just respond from a place of love and acceptance and allowing them to be who they are, allowing them to feel that emotion, that's your emotion, that's how you perceive it, um, then, and without making them wrong, right, for their emotion or for how they're perceiving it. Because I'm not in that person's body. I don't have all of their experiences. I don't fully understand all of their fears and where these reactions are coming from. Okay. And based on their life experiences and what's happened to them and their fears and what's going on in the inside of them, uh, their response may feel very legitimate. So if I'm making them wrong for that response, it's the same as them making me wrong for doing something that I feel is very legitimate, right? That I feel is okay. So is there a way to respond to that that doesn't do that, right? And what I get, the point I'm getting to is that how I respond to things says more about who I am than, and about who I choose to be, rather than um, reacting to whatever is coming at me in the same vein that it's coming at me. Now, this definitely takes taking a pause before I respond. So, um, I guess what I'm trying to say is how I respond is not about who the other person is, but it's about who I am, or who I choose to be, and what I choose to do. So I'm not letting the other person control or direct who I am choosing to be and what I am choosing to do in my life. So when I choose to respond to something negative that's coming at me in love without pushing back, without making them wrong, I'm making a choice about who I am, right? They're going to be who they are. I don't have control over that. And I shouldn't try to take control over who they are or over what their emotions are or over what their response is. I shouldn't try to do that. That's not my job. That's not my responsibility. That's not my role, right? My role is my circle, right? That's my circle, my body, my energy field. And I am in control of that piece, okay? And what they do to me, what they put at me, I can choose to take it in or I can choose to just say, nope, no, thank you. I'm not accepting that on, and I'm not going to let that change who I am living in that my space, right? And I'm not going to go into their space and be like, you shouldn't feel like that. You shouldn't be doing that, right? Because from their point of view, that may be completely legitimate what they're doing and who they are and how they react and how they respond. Even if I feel like that they're behaving in a way that's not loving or that's not sane, right? Or that's unreasonable, it's still their response, not mine. And I am not responsible to change them and to change their response. And I think so often, especially when something negative is directed at me, um, it is the tendency to want to, our ego is there, right? And it's like, I'm not that way, right? And they're like judging me for being something that I feel like I'm not, right? And that I maybe have worked hard not to be that way. Then it's my perception, right? It's challenging my perception of myself, challenging my ideal. And that can be very hard. That is probably one of the key things that's really hard to take. And so to be able to step away from that is not easy. And I must say, I definitely do mess up on this sometimes. And I start by responding in kind. And, but if I can pause, if I can take some time just to pause and to think and to pray and to step outside of that and say, okay, I see this person, I see what they're doing, I see, that they're reacting from maybe a place of fear. Then I can say, how do I want to react back? If I love them, can I react to this in love instead of reacting back to them in fear or in anger, right? And what is anger really coming from? It's coming from a place of fear, because love and fear cannot exist in the same space, in the same body, in the same energy field. One always pushes the other out. So if we choose to live from a place of love, then we're choosing to live from a place of acceptance of the other person, right? Acceptance for who they are and where they're at and what their emotions are about that, and just letting them be there and not feeling like I have to change them, but also recognizing that they cannot change me without my permission, without my allowing that into my space. So, hey, travel seer, nice to see you. So that is one of the main things I wanted to share, because our response to other people is who we are, not who they are, not what they're giving off to us. It's what we choose to be. Like, am I going to stand in my power? Am I going to stand in my understanding? Am I going to stand in my energy sphere and my field and say, hey, I see you. I see that anger. I see what's going on. I know that's not me. I know that has stuff to do with other things that are going on in that person's life. Can I just love them anyway and just let that be, right? And that when I respond like that, then it has really beautiful, has a really beautiful effect, right? Because that allows that person, they're not getting that resistance against them, right? So if you have nothing to resist or push against, then that resistance can just flow away. You see? And that's how I'm. It's actually a martial arts technique, right? So martial arts, the original martial arts, is really all about energy. It's about energy flow, displacement. It's about redirecting energy. Hey, Genesis, nice to see you. And so if I don't take on that, if I just let it just let it pass through, and I just respond back in love, then that person has nothing to fight against. So then they have to be like, wow, what am I doing? Okay, maybe let me take a pause too, right? It gives both parties a chance to pause and to breathe. And sometimes it doesn't happen right away, right? So it may take a day or two for them to, kind of come around and be like, wow, okay, I see. Maybe that wasn't the right way to be or to respond. And maybe they don't. Who knows? Um, it's sometimes about having compassion for the other person and seeing where they are at and what they're going through, and recognizing that it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me. And then where there are times, also being open to saying, okay, um, am I acting in a way that is that could be interpreted like this? And not that I have to change it, right? But when I understand what it is, or when I understand what's going on or what's upsetting them, then I get to say, do I want to change this in myself or not? Do I think that um, shifting how I behave in this way is going to be better for me? Is that who more of who I want to be or choose to be? Not, am I going to change this because they're mad at me, and because, not in a like people pleasing way, right? Not in where it's like, well, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be suffering all this anger coming at me, right? Because if we don't let that in our space, then it doesn't have to push us or manipulate us in the same way. I'm not saying that it doesn't have an effect, because it does, especially when it's people close to you. But I am saying that it is possible, and I've been experiencing that, to step back out of that space and allow it to be, and not take it on, and then look at the actual facts, look at the actual acts, and say, huh, okay, this person is experiencing life like this. They would like me to do this thing. Um, do I think that if I did that more, would I be a better person? Would I become more of who I want to be? Is that something that I feel I can do without jeopardizing myself and my core? Right? Is that gonna is that growth for me or not? See? And when I can actually look at something from that perspective and ask that question about that individual thing, not about the anger, not about the all this other stuff, right? Because I mean, I tend to take negative emotion and anger and stuff like that. I tend to see it as a form of manipulation, right? It's a form of direct manipulation. When someone gets angry at you, and oftentimes they don't realize it themselves, right? But that kind of direct push, that direct force, right? I'm going to be angry at you, um, to try to force someone to shift their behavior. Okay. That's a direct force approach instead of what might be a better way to do it, right? If someone is really mature or enlightened, then they probably won't take that direct force approach. They will instead take a different approach, right? Where they're like, hey, this is what I would like. Um, how can I make this easier for you? How can I make this better for you to give me what I would like to have, what I need? That's a mature approach, right? Or to look at the person and think about, how do I incentivize them? How do I make this attractive to them? How do I make them want to do this? That's a mature approach to something rather than the direct force approach. But most of us, our whole lives, have learned the direct force approach. We've learned that from our parents, right? When we did something our parents didn't like, what did they do? They yelled at us, or they slapped us, right? Or they did something like bang as a direct force approach to stop that behavior that they didn't like. And so we have learned this as it's a learned manipulation technique. But most people don't see it as that. Most people think, I'm justified in my anger. This person did something bad. My negative emotions towards them are justified. It's justified for me to be angry at them or to yell at them or whatever like that, right? We tend to feel like if we didn't feel like our anger was justified, guess what? We wouldn't be doing it, right? For us to feel anger in that way, we feel then it to us it has to feel justified. So when someone is in that space, they feel very justified. So coming up against them and against that justification, it doesn't really help, right? Um, but that direct approach of trying to whack somebody over the head with emotion or negative emotion or even just like the cold, giving them the cold shoulder or withdrawal or threats or I'm going to leave or I'm going to go away, right? All of that sort of stuff is all manipulation as far as it's a more direct approach. Sometimes it appears passive aggressive, right? Where it's like, well, I'm just going to go away, or you don't love me, or it can happen in a more passive aggressive way. It can happen in a more um, direct, I'm angry at you for not doing this way. But either way, those are all um, emotional manipulation tactics against the other person that the person who is doing it is most likely not aware of. Now, some people do it consciously. There are some people who are very manipulative and they will consciously use anger or guilt or other things like that as a way to directly get what they want, to get someone to put pressure on someone to do what they want. But I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that that's what they're doing. They don't realize that they're acting in a way that's coming from how they were taught, from upbringing, from parents, from everything else. You don't like what someone is doing, get angry at them, and maybe they'll stop. Okay. And it's a tactic or technique to try to get what we think we need or what we think we want. Okay. But what it really is doing is taking away the other person's space. Now, I'm not talking about an instance where, like somebody is abusing a child and we get angry, right? And this is kind of a, we step into our power in that anger. We're like, stop that abuse, right? Stop that thing that you're doing. I'm not talking about that, right? I'm talking about when someone is doing something we just don't like, or they're not treating us in the way we want to be treated, right? Then the kind of the first go-to for most people is the direct control response, using anger, negative emotion, cold shoulder, isolation, whatever, to try to get them to shift their behavior. But the person, like I said, who's doing it often doesn't realize that that is what they're doing. Now, when you become aware and you can see that's what they're doing, then the first reaction I have when I feel like someone's doing that to me is, right, I don't want to be manipulated. Don't give me your manipulation crap, right? Don't try to force me to do something using those techniques or tactics. So then I also have to step back, right? Because then I can feel like anger at feeling like I'm being manipulated in that way and push back on that as well, which is also not that helpful, right? As I've said before. So what is the response in that case, right? First of all, recognizing that a lot of people that are doing it, they don't really realize what they're doing. And they may feel like, oh, I'm justified in my emotion or whatever that is. And yes, you can be justified in, or you can feel like you're justified in an emotion, right? Of anger against somebody else for not doing what you want them to do. You can feel like that emotion is justified, or maybe you feel hurt by something, or maybe you feel afraid by something, right? And so you're lashing out or pushing back. But I think oftentimes when we step back from that and we say, oh, what was really going on there? Actually, I was afraid of this and this. Or I felt hurt by this and this, because to me, when someone does this or doesn't do this, I experience it as a lack of love or a lack of concern or consideration, or I experience it as something negative or something to be afraid of, right? And so then I get upset or I react in that way. So when we have the maturity to step back and the knowledge to step back and recognize for ourselves where this reaction is coming from, it's not that we can't feel that emotion or feel that reaction, but then to go inside and be like, okay. And it maybe it happens later, maybe it happens the next day or a couple of days later or whatever. But as the sooner we can start catching that, the better for our relationships. Because recognizing, hold on, this is my thing. This is my emotion. I'm upset about this because of this. Um, and maybe it has nothing as much to do with the other person as I really think it does. So what is it I need? What is it makes me feel good? Can I ask for that in a way that is not attacking to the other person, but it is requesting it? And you know what? It is so much harder to do it that way, because when you do it that way, you're making yourself vulnerable. When you make a request to somebody, not a demand, but a request, can you do this for me because this allows me to feel this way, right? You're making yourself vulnerable. It's much more vulnerable than getting angry and making the other person wrong, right? By getting angry and making the other person wrong, you are pushing. So that's not vulnerable at all. But stepping back and saying, wow, I actually really need this because it makes me feel like this. And you're admitting a need, and which is hugely vulnerable, right? And making a request, which is even more vulnerable because that request could be rejected. That request could be refused. And I mean, when you make a request and that request is refused, oh, that really, really hurts, right? And so that is the truly vulnerable place. Getting angry and getting upset and being like, you should be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that, that's not being vulnerable. That's being attacking. So recognizing all of this, right? And recognizing how are we reacting to the other person, and then saying, okay, I see what the person's doing, but they probably don't realize what they're doing, right? So to me, I experience it in a certain way that can definitely trigger me because I really hate manipulation and control and someone like getting into my face and into my space and using anger or force to try to get me to do something instead of just saying, I would like this. This would make me happy. Would you be willing to do this for me? Right? That's a request, and totally different energy, totally different space, right? And also in that energy, when you're making a request, it's not making the other person wrong for not doing it. It's not making the other person wrong for choosing not to do it. It is making it is asking because that's something you desire, that's something you want, that's something you feel you need. And if they choose not to do it, they're not wrong. Woo, that's the hard part. If they choose not to do it, they're not wrong, because guess what? They have complete sovereignty over their body, over their actions, over their thoughts, over their emotions. Makes it even more vulnerable when you realize that. Wow, that's even more vulnerable. That's even harder place to recognize from. But I think that when we come from a place like that and we ask in that way, it is, to me, if someone does that to me, it is such a relief. It is such a relief because I feel like, wow, okay, I'm not being manipulated. Someone's really just making a request of something. And then if I feel like I'm not being manipulated and I can relax into it and be like, okay, whew, well, if that is something really important to them, then, I love them. So maybe I will do that for them, right? Maybe I'll choose that because they're requesting it and I can see that it makes them happy. Okay. It shifts the whole energy of the interaction. So that is, but just because I would prefer to be approached that way, right? Just because I understand that that is the way we want to be treating each other and approaching each other, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen all the time. Right? Because like I said, most people haven't realized that. Nobody has explained that or taught that to them, or they haven't reached that level of understanding in their life. They haven't had enough, interactions and experiences to really understand about what's going on. And so in that case, even when that's coming at me, is there a way that I can take it and reinterpret it, right? Is there a way that I can separate out the negative emotion and the anger and the, what I experience as manipulation, and look for what is that request. What is that thing that that person is asking for that I am not doing, right? Or that I haven't done in the past? Or what is it that they're asking for that they need? Is there a way that I can fulfill that need um, because I love them without, you know, jeopardizing my own sovereignty, right? So when are we really jeopardizing our sovereignty? Is when someone comes at us with that kind of anger and we do it to appease them. Then we're jeopardizing our sovereignty. Okay. If I am just doing what they're asking because they're angry at me and because I feel afraid, or I'm afraid of losing the relationship, or um, I'm afraid of the anger. Okay. This is real. I mean, I do experience fear at that kind of stuff. We all do, especially if we grew up with, parents who were violent or abusive, right? But we all have this from usually from our childhood, right? Where we experience this sense, and especially for women, it is even much stronger. So, um, but if I can separate out that and look and say, what is it this person is requesting? And try to look at their heart. Look for the heart. Like, is there a vulnerability there? Is there a need there based on who they are? And even recognizing that these things may be coming from something in their past, from abandonment, from um, you know, uh, bad experiences, or whatever that may be, right? Or from how they perceive the world. Then I can say, am I going to choose to do this out of love, um, and not because I'm feeling manipulated or controlled, right? That is that that is leveling up. I will tell you that much. That's leveling up, right? Because the natural reaction is to get angry back. The natural reaction is to justify. The natural reaction is to push back. And for me, when I see this type of emotion and I experience it as manipulation, my natural reaction is to be like, right? Because I'm following this. I'm like, we should not be trying to directly manipulate people. Now, of course, if we're talking about, rescuing somebody, right, who's being hurt or harmed or abused, totally different thing. Go for it, bang, full power ahead. But when we're dealing with people in our interpersonal relationships, right, it's usually never that. It's not that kind of a thing at all. It's just, how do we want to be treated? How do we want them to treat us? How do we experience what is love? What is a good relationship? What is communication, right? It's all of those things. And this is where all of our deepest fears and vulnerabilities really bubble up to the surface. And which is why I think a lot of times we behave in our intimate and personal relationships in a way that's very different than we behave with outsiders, right? With business people. We let all of that scary emotion come out and go on the other person, which we wouldn't do to someone outside, to a business associate, right? So how do we deal with that? How do we treat the person in the intimate relationship with, I would say, not even as much care as the outsider, right? More care and love, and taking that extra step even further than we would with an outsider. Mostly we keep all of our best stuff for the outside world, right? Our patience, our, all of that stuff. And then in our intimate relationships, we just let it all out. But the other person in our intimate relationship is and should be the most important person to us, and their well-being, their health, their happiness. That is what should be the most important to us. So why do we not bring our best self to that? Why do we not deal with our own stuff on our own time and bring the best side of ourselves to that person, and really try to behave in the way that is mature and loving and not manipulative to foster the growth of that relationship in a way that is going to make two people just amazing together, right? But it has to start somewhere, and somebody has to have the responsibility to start that process. And if you're hearing this, then that person is you, right? So we each have the responsibility for ourselves, not to put that responsibility on the other person. We each have to take that responsibility on ourselves. I'm going to choose to be this way because this is the person that I want to be. This is the person that I choose to be. And it's not about the other person, how they react or respond. It's about who I am. And this is the choice that I make, right? So, that's really one of the key things that I've been learning. I think it's a lifelong process to learn this for sure, because so often in the moment we get triggered and bang, respond, and then we're like, oh crap, oh no, oh well, that didn't help things at all, right? So, and for me, I make a lot of mistakes with this for sure, and I definitely sometimes I respond out of turn, or sometimes I think I'm like waiting for the right moment to have a discussion, and it ends up totally wrong, right? And oftentimes it's going to be because I am taking an action that is incorrect, right? I am doing something in a way that is putting judgment on the other person for how they feel or their emotion or whatever that is, instead of just saying, you know what? In their mind, they're perfectly justified to feel this way. I may see it totally different, but in their mind, in their world, and with their experiences, they feel justified, right? So in their world, they're justified. And how can I fight against that? Why would I fight against that? I can just choose how I am going to respond in that way, and respond in the way that of the person who I want to be. And who's the person that I want to be? I want to be someone who is loving, someone who is accepting, someone who lives in a place of peace and lives in a place of harmony and love, right? And so how am I going to get to that place? I have to be living in that place myself. And of course, we all deal with emotional ups and downs and times when we are frustrated or tired, or just maybe not able to give that extra bit, right? And in those times, honestly, for me, I try to just step back and disengage and wait until I am in a better space where I can do it without lashing out back. So sometimes you just have to take a pause and just say, let's talk about this later, right? Let's do this later. Oftentimes though, when I do that, I can just end up avoiding the conversation altogether, which is also not good, right? So it is a work in process to get to the point where we actually have the honest conversation still, but don't maybe not having it right in that moment when all of those emotions are running high, or when I'm too tired to really be able to be there fully present and manage my own emotions at the same time, right? So anyway, that's some of what I have been learning. I hope that is helpful for you. This was definitely longer than I intended to go today, but yeah, this is just some of the stuff that I've been learning, and watching it bear good fruit in my life as far as that goes. So I hope you guys have a beautiful day, and let me know about your own experiences. I would love to hear from you. Share this video. Let me know about how you experience these things in relationships. Do you get triggered when people are doing something? How do you feel? Do you feel justified in that anger or in that hurt or in lashing out at them? Is there times when afterwards, maybe a few hours later, maybe a few days later, you step back and you realize, wow, okay, that really wasn't how I wanted to be, or that really wasn't loving, or maybe that was coming from something I didn't recognize at the time. And if you see that in yourself, then you're on the path. Then that can give you greater incentive, even in the moment, in the rush of that emotion and that anger, that negative thing, to say, well, I have seen that I do this sometimes, and And later on, I feel bad about it. And I realize maybe it wasn't as justified as I thought. So maybe I just pull back right now. Maybe I just don't, do that. And I give myself a little time to cool off and I think about it and then come at it from a different way, right? Um, that's growth. That's growth. When you are on that path, boy, you are leveling up big time. And that's how we create a better world all around. We're always like out saying, how do we have a better world? How do we have better relationships? It's by doing this work, by recognizing that we are responsible for ourselves and for our emotions and for how we choose to be in the world, and not putting the blame on the other person and saying, well, I reacted like this because you did this, right? Um, that's taking responsibility for ourselves and our own emotion and our own well-being, and even getting to the point where we can say, I can take responsibility to give myself some of these things that I need, and so I'm not as afraid to not get them from the other person in my life, because I know that I can find that sense of peace or centeredness or stability or love, whatever it is, not necessarily with going out and getting it from another person, but from ourselves or from our relationship with God, right? So there's other ways to fulfill our own needs. And it's often when we're in a place of fear that we lash out at somebody else because we feel like we really need them and we need something that they can give us. And we're afraid to lose that. And but taking responsibility for ourselves is also taking responsibility to fulfill our needs in that way as well, if and when we need to. Not that we have to, right? I mean, we could first give the other person the opportunity to do that, because giving them that opportunity allows them to engage in the process, allows them to give love, right? So giving them the opportunity is great. But if they don't choose to take that opportunity, to also know that we can give ourselves what we need, and we don't have to be afraid and push it necessarily on them. So that gives us a sense of stability so that we can do the process that I'm talking about, where we can actually dial back all of the, trying to get it directly through direct control, and look at it as a matter of, let's give incentives, let's ask, let's be vulnerable, and be in a different space about it and about that energy. So hopefully that was helpful. It's just definitely something that is that I think I've been in the process of learning it for quite some time, and definitely coming home to work on it in myself. So I hope you guys have a beautiful day and enjoy your weekend. Yay! I'll talk to you tomorrow.